There's a bigger truth behind it.
Yeah.
So this is really, I think this is really what the Spirit Underground is about. How do we remember our true nature, which is light, energy, emptiness, not in the empty from the concept that we know it, but it's empty of sort of suffering in a way, right?
Yeah.
And then also be effective. To be effective here and now, because there's a lot going on in just the last week in the wider world. Welcome to the Spirit Underground podcast with Dharma teachers Spring Washam and Lama Rod Owens. These conversations will include topics on Black liberation theology, healing with plant-based medicine, indigenous wisdom, Buddhist-based meditation practices, and reconnecting to our ancestral knowledge. Together, we will explore what freedom means individually, collectively, and spiritually. If you would like to support the Spirit Underground podcast, please visit the BeHereNowNetwork.com/donate. Hello, everybody. This is Spring Washam, and
this is Lama Rod.
We're back. Spirit Underground conversations on liberation. Yes, brother. We love to talk about this all day.
Well, all day is all I ever talk about, actually, now. It's like,
I know.
Are you free? I'm like walking down the sidewalk, yelling at people. Are you free? You ready to get free?
Do they say anything back to you, or they just kind of look at you?
They're just like,
They're like, okay,
yeah, I've been but even seriously, like I've been really like getting serious about these conversations with people and with students, and community as well. Like, are we really trying to get free? I've been spending a lot of time with Harriet, in practice and meditation and channeling, and I feel so aligned with her ethic about, which is really about by any means necessary. Malcolm X's ethic, it's like by any means necessary, we need to get free, but freedom doesn't look like this really nice, sweet labor.
Nice and sweet labor. Yeah,
that's messy.
Yeah, it's messy.
Yeah.
Childbirth or labor of evolution.
Yeah. And I think people want to they want to stay clean and pure. I just don't think that's compatible with really transcending delusion and dualism. Like, you have to, there's a complexity here that we have to embody, if we keep holding on to, the ways in which we use other people's perspectives about us to validate a sense of self, then like we won't ever get out of here. Like, sometimes we have to embrace and hold the ways in which we're being labeled.
Say being more labeled, about that.
Yeah, it's like being labeled difficult. I mean, that's like, when I was coming up in activist communities, right, it was like, there was just all these really difficult people, who were just like really edgy and anxious and who were always serious. Are you serious about the work? Are you conscious? Are you, do you know what's happening? Do you know what's going down? And those people were really hard to be around. Absolutely. And as I was coming up, learning from those folks, I thought, well, there's definitely a way to be serious about the work, but not to have such an edge, about it.
Right,
this is why
absolutely.
Joy is really a huge thing for me. I think joy helps to I think smooth the edges of our anxiety around liberation work, and it propels it at the same time.
Absolutely.
I think this is why Dharma practice is so important, as a system, as a collaborative system that we actually integrate into social liberation work alongside ultimate liberation work.
So how do you get down and dirty and then still
Yeah,
have joy? Just roll
yeah,
around, wrestle the demons,
yeah,
look at where we're imprisoning ourselves, look at
yeah,
the ways we hold ourselves back. And how do you untangle but still have that
yeah.
joy?
Well, I think the principal ethic around joy, or well, more specifically around the labor of getting free in joy, is that like I am so deeply grateful to have the opportunity to wrestle with these forces and to do the
Mm,
work. Like I am conscious enough, I'm aware enough to choose the work of getting free,
mhm,
right? And that gratitude of choosing the work is really my doorway into joy. Like I can't believe I have the fortune to really work for this, to really align my whole life, around liberation work, like for myself, for others, uniting or bringing together social liberation with ultimate liberation, as well.
mhm,
And that keeps me going, because I know that this is having such a deep, profound impact on the the course of my life and the course of my lives to come, right? Like by
mhm.
taking this moment and just saying, you know what, how am I going to get free in this moment? And this is like, well, it's like, you know, planting or like sowing seeds, for a crop or a harvest, right? Like I feel like I'm able and have the capacity to sow all these seeds for a
Mm.
future awakening, And
Absolutely. It's like we're putting money in our bank account for our retirement, but we
yeah.
don't really, that could be at some other time, but we are like accruing something. So, Rod, talk more
Mhm,
about liberation from the point of like when we're pointing to people, I'm imagining
mhm,
listeners who are adopting this and they're like, yeah, but what are we doing? And ultimately, when I think about liberation,
mhm.
it's this idea of just this letting go of it all, right?
Yeah.
Seeing beyond it, the
Mhm,
illusion. So maybe
mhm,
talk more about, when you're saying do the work of
mhm.
liberation, what does that look
Yeah,
like? Is this you
yeah.
letting go? Is this you seeing it as a dream? Is this,
Mhm,
what is that? How do we practice that? How
yeah,
do we, because we want to, bring it down.
yeah.
And also, I'm teaching myself all the time.
Mhm,
What's
mhm.
the
Well,
view
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
liberation here?
Yeah, and this is a process is always deepening and becoming more
Hmm.
transparent. But, I am reminded of what we used to sing growing up in church was that, "This world is not my home," right?
Mm.
And that's such profound Dharma, that's, liberation part of liberation, well, Black liberation theology. This world isn't my home, and that's really where we start. Of course, that's the illusion, the dream that we talk about, in Buddhism. This isn't my home, this reality, which I call the carceral state, right?
Mm.
This isn't my home, this is an experience that I'm moving through, right? This is like, even in this way, a figment of my imagination, right? And what my work is initially is to understand that this is a figment of my imagination, right? That doesn't mean I start divesting from the world. It doesn't mean that like I become apathetic or, or callous in a way, to the workings of the world. But what it means is that I stop taking it so seriously. And I begin to understand that I'm much more than this world. I'm much more than this body, right? And that I am
Yes.
actually this transcendent being, right? Who's trying to remember their transcendence, their divinity. But
Yes.
we get
Yes.
we get distracted in this realm, in the carceral state, because of the lack of clarity, that we call delusion, are the ways in which we get wrapped up into clinging and longing and craving, as the Buddha taught, you know?
Absolutely. And it's so easy to get tied up in all those knots. I mean, it seems
Yeah,
so real. I mean, I remember I
yeah.
used to ask Minja Rinpoche, why does it seem so real if
Yeah,
it's really a dream?
mhm,
Why does it seem like that? And, he would talk about just the clarity, the aspect of the mind that has this
yeah.
clarity. But
Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah,
letting go and
yeah,
remembering, this is
yeah,
really at the heart of the liberation,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, and then you transition from reactivity and judgment of everything to being able to respond, right? And when I respond, I am choosing how to invest my energy, which is awareness, and
Yes.
attention, and I invest it into experiences, trying to figure out what those experiences are, right? And how to free those experiences from my perceptions of it or them, right?
Yes, our ideas
Yeah,
about it, whatever the
yeah,
thing is, right? It's not the thing itself, it's
yeah.
just our concepts.
Because everything has to be freed, right? So
Mm.
people, we have to be freed, are conscious beings, including animals and so forth, humans and other conscious beings. We have to be freed from the delusion, right? We have to be freed from the distractions of the phenomenal world and reinvest our attention, our awareness into the essence of all phenomena, which is emptiness and fluidity and energy, right? Um, and we also have to free phenomena from our perceptions of it, you know?
Mm.
So it's like the way that we label everything and create a
Yeah,
reality.
yeah.
It's like this
Solidity.
old, yeah, we solidify everything
Yeah.
by naming it. So, it's like the basic kinds of meditation practices that, usually as beginners we move through. And some of those practices are contemplating the nature of an object, you know? So it's like we used to use a candle flame, and I started with a candle flame actually as one of my first practices. And then you would contemplate in your meditation space, like, what is a candle? What is a flame? What's fire? What's heat? What's light? Like, so what I label these things and these experiences, but what are these experiences? Do they have an inherent being, you know, an isness or a suchness? Maybe we can say, but I don't think things just disappear when you develop a deeper awareness of the nature of phenomena. I think what happens is phenomena becomes lighter. Like it doesn't feel so heavy
Like
and
nothing feels
permanent.
as heavy. Like we're not as invested in it
Yeah.
anymore,
Yeah.
right? If I believe that something is real, I'm heavily engaging with it,
Yeah.
right? I'm worried about it. I'm longing for it. I'm
Yeah.
attracted to it. I'm not attracted to it. So
Mhm.
these are some real high teachings right now, Rod. I hope people can catch the thread of
Yeah.
this. Like we're
Yeah.
we're really talking, we're pointing to the absolute truth here.
Right. And I think it's always the struggle, and particularly for, well, I would say, I was going to say it's a struggle for people new to this, but it's also a struggle for people who have been in this practice and teaching for a while. Like, how do you balance the absolute and the relative,
Right.
and still remain engaged in the world? Because the potential is that we just bypass the relative for the absolute, you
Right. So on
know?
the relative level, we mean this conventional level of
Yeah.
reality. We mean the karmic level, the level of my name is spring. It's
Mhm.
1225. There's all these
Yeah.
concepts. But the truth is, second truth is that we're all really made of light, energy,
Yeah.
stars. And so if we get out of balance in either one of those, it seems they're suffering, right? You see the people who are like, I'm the
Yeah,
universe, but they're not taking care of their bills. They're harming people. They've
yeah,
entered a delusion. And then if you're too much on the relative, you become like those activists,
yeah,
like
yeah,
bitter too. And they forget
yeah,
that there are stars and there's a bigger truth behind it.
yeah, yeah,
So this is really, I think this is really what the Spirit Underground is about. How do
mhm,
we remember our true nature, which is light,
right,
energy, um, emptiness, not in the empty from the concept that we know it, but it's
right,
empty of sort of suffering in a way,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, and then also be effective, to
yeah,
be effective here and now, because there's a lot going on. And just the last week in
mhm,
the wider world to get distracted by. I
yeah,
mean,
mhm,
I don't think we're going to get a lot of good news anytime soon,
right,
just in the matrix.
yeah, mhm,
It's getting more
mhm,
intense. Maybe it's always been that,
yeah,
but I love to what we're pointing to here is the liberation is our more of the recognition of our true nature,
yeah,
and how to live more fluidly in this relative conventional the 3D world. That's what we're
right,
talking about. We could use that terminology for people, 3D and 5D,
yeah,
still concepts, but people sometimes relate to that way
yeah,
of speaking about consciousness.
yeah. Well, and another part, and this goes to what you've just mentioned about the heaviness of the times right now. It's like part of the carceral state or samsara, right, is the heaviness. Like that's I think one of the characteristics. It's like it's supposed to be difficult. Like because this isn't art because it's based on delusion and delusion is
Mm.
suffering, right? So of course this experience right now that we're having is full of suffering right now because it's supposed to be full of suffering, right? But we're supposed to be learning from the suffering, in terms of like how to start developing a deeper perception into what phenomena really is, back into this emptiness and energy and fluidity and space, right?
Right.
And the more we're able to do that, actually, the more capacity we have to help people, right? I think that the more realization we have of the relative, like it gives us a deeper insight into really how to benefit people, right? And our
Mm.
realization in turn is taking care of us, because our suffering is being decreased, and lessened. And so when our suffering is being taken care of, it's less likely to distract us from benefiting others.
Exactly. When our tangles aren't getting in the way, when we have a
Hmm.
clear intention for the day. And
Hmm.
then, as we know, those days happen where all the suffering takes over and we're not effective. We're not who we want to be in those moments. We're entangled. And I think
Yeah,
all of us understand this. Um, and those on the path of liberation, I think there's so many people longing for freedom right now. Like you're
hmm,
walking around saying it, but it's also, you have a choir of people being like, yeah, I'm ready
yeah,
too, right? They're
yeah,
responding. You're asking, they're like, yes.
yeah,
And it's exciting to see that. That's not being shown on the news, you
right,
know, that's not
right,
being amplified so much right now. But yeah, to help people be lighter, to remember their true nature,
hmm,
to work toward that. And it just feels like just remembering who they
yeah,
really are,
right,
remembering your absolute nature while navigating in this reality that's, as we know, marked with greed, hatred, and
mm,
delusion. Samsara is the
exactly,
wheel of suffering. And
exactly,
it's made like this. It's no one's
hmm,
fault.
right,
We
hmm,
just have to use it to wake up. I hear you on that. We have to keep growing. But it's juicy and it's compelling and it's triggering everyone in many ways, and we just have to
hmm,
keep working with that.
hmm,
Those
hmm.
triggers. Yes.
Yeah. Well, with the triggers, you know, um, it's like a trigger is like a big red button, that you walk around with. And, people are going to trigger it. People are going to like push that red button if they see it, or, we're always going to have that sensitivity until we begin to tend to those sensitivities. As one of my teachers said once, it's like, if you don't want anyone to push the button, take it away.
Right, turn it, deactivate it. Yeah, exactly.
Deactivate it,
Yourself.
and, I think one of the realities of being so traumatized is that we lose the capacity to have a sensitivity to how to actually heal and move through the trauma.
Mm.
We just become, for many of us, we become really numb. And I think right now there's so much trauma, personal trauma, collective trauma, vicarious trauma, right? In spaces, there are a lot of people who are just absorbing this and shutting down and feeling overwhelmed and tired and angry or hopeless and so forth, right? And it takes this intense level of intentionality and labor, right, to continue disrupting the absorption and the flourishing of trauma within our experiences of body and mind and collective. But the collective piece is something that we have to work with others, right? But so the fundamental labor is how I am metabolizing trauma in my personal experience right now. What are
Yes,
the boundaries?
absolutely. Yes.
You
And
know,
how do
I'm
we do
mhm,
it?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Well, we have to figure out what our practices are, you
Absolutely.
know, and I think boundaries are the primary thing we start with, and I'm talking with several people right now. Some of them are very well known influencers, that everyone knows. And just in conversation with them and about the ways in which they have to like really reaffirm their boundaries right now, and what that means is you get clear about what you no longer need to do or can't do in the moment, and you say no. I
Right.
can't do this, right?
And it's hard to establish it, right? In a way, there's like
Yeah,
these nuances,
yeah,
of knowing our own system, knowing our own field and knowing, yeah, I
hmm,
want to talk about that more in the terms of boundaries, healing our trauma. We've been talking
hmm,
about this ancestral
hmm,
trauma. And it seems like we always talk about it, right? When you get
right.
Black folks together, ancestral trauma. It was like,
Yeah,
maybe we could phrase it like ancestral liberation,
yeah,
because we all get the images. As soon as we say
yes,
Black folks, ancestral trauma, we're all there. We're
hmm,
all like, oh God. So
yeah,
there's something about it that's hard. But also, I want to talk about it in terms of real liberation. Like, we want to lighten this load now, right? It
yeah,
feels like this burden.
yeah,
Like you and I were together doing a retreat and not long ago in
yeah,
September, and we were like, can we lift this burden? Do we have to,
hmm,
how many times are we gonna? So I guess I want to talk about our ancestral trauma in two ways.
right,
One, we have to experience, liberate, go through. And
hmm,
then there's another group of us that's like, how much do we revisit?
yeah,
This whole conversation that you and I were
yeah,
having about, closing the doors to the lower
hmm,
realms, to the trauma
hmm,
field, but yet
hmm,
honoring it, opening it, but yet you have to liberate it.
yeah,
So I think a lot of my folks have this topic when we talk about ancestral trauma. How do we hold it now? Some people feel
hmm,
tired,
hmm,
others feel inspired. Some people
yeah,
are like, let's just shoot to the stars. That's our
yeah,
true nature. But are they
yeah,
bypassing the wounds?
yeah, yeah.
I don't know, just a minor conversation on an epic topic when we talk about ancestral
Yeah.
trauma. Oh my God.
Well, and then, like, I think there's even another group of people where trauma, ancestral trauma, collective trauma have been normalized and pathologized, so they don't even know, that, like, there's a different way to feel.
Right, they're
you
just, like,
know?
in it, and there's
Yeah,
not even space to question it.
yeah,
This is just
exactly.
reality is the weight of the suffering, and I'll
Yeah,
stay in this state of trauma.
yeah.
Uh-huh,
So, yes,
definitely.
I think there's a lot of people who are brand new to this idea of ancestral trauma, right? And, kinda growing up in, some of the communities that many of us grew up in, particularly those of us who are listening to this podcast, I think many of us didn't grow up with an understanding of ancestors and definitely not an understanding of trauma. And certainly when you start talking about ancestral trauma, then this is like a whole brand new thing, that people
Mm.
feel, you know, well, you can feel as if you're struggling to really comprehend this,
Do you
you
think that
know?
our people know it, but they don't have a
Mhm.
language, some of them? Because, we
Yes.
see the
Yeah.
images, we see roots, we
Mhm.
see the
Yeah.
history, we read about it, so we know something has been done.
Yeah.
We feel that our suffering is connected, but you think they just don't have the language of this kind
Mhm.
of precision to
Right.
understand the complexity of what we mean by ancestral trauma. Mhm.
Yeah. I
But
think
they
so.
know it. I know our people know it. I know
Yeah.
that they feel that
Yeah.
oppression. They react
Yeah.
to it.
Well, I think, for instance, like the language of being tired is really us
Mm.
trying to name trauma, you know.
Wow.
Um, I mean, yeah, I totally agree. I think that like we're not calling it trauma, but we're talking about it,
All
but
the
we don't know it's
time.
trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, all the time.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
family violence, the
Yeah.
incarceration. I mean, it's constantly like in our certain field. We
Yeah.
do it's everywhere, but we don't quite know. I guess we're so you're right, a group there's people that are so connected to it, they're not
Hmm.
questioning it, they're just
Hmm.
living it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
life, is that
Yeah.
field.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, this was the gift of ayahuasca to me. It didn't feel like a gift when it started, but like the gift was, it
It was like
was
a
like
hell realm gift,
it was
yeah.
hell realm. It's like pulling back the veils, pulling back the curtains, and saying and revealing, okay, this is what we're talking about. Like you talk about ancestral trauma, here it is.
Like,
And not
yours was,
only,
like, ripped out, like, let's
yeah,
talk about your whole journey.
yeah,
Lama Rod came to Lotus Vine Journeys Retreat a couple of
hmm,
years ago. I think it was
yeah,
2018, 19,
19, hmm.
2019, and Rod and I met at a
Hmm.
Black and Buddhist conference. We'd known
Well,
about each other.
we met earlier than that
Yeah, we met
though.
earlier. Yeah, but
But
it was there.
we really talked in 2018.
We talked in 2018, but the minute I saw Rod, I was like, "You have to come to Peru. You have to drink ayahuasca." So I've
Mhm,
been leading this work through my organization,
mhm,
Lotus Vine Journeys, which blends Buddhism, ayahuasca, and I kept saying, Rod, the whole conference when we were talking about Black liberation theology, I kept asking him, "Are you sure you don't want to come? You should come on the next retreat." I don't remember following you around and being
mhm.
kind of enamored for some reason. And um, yeah. Uh, so anyway, he
Mhm,
comes on the retreat and yeah, maybe just share because
right,
it was one for me working with you on that retreat was one
mhm,
of the most profound experiences I've
mhm,
ever gone through.
right,
Um, and so yeah, maybe you can just share how all this happened for you
right.
or whatever you'd like.
Yeah. Well, up until that point, in 2018 when we reconnected, I'd been thinking about ceremonies and ayahuasca and plant medicine. I was getting curious about it, but, really hadn't found, anything to really try, or certainly not a facilitator, or anyone to work with. But, when you started talking to me about the retreats, the thing that became a sign for me was that the retreats, the following year started on my 40th birthday, the
Mm,
day of my
mhm.
40th birthday. And I'd been praying to do something significant for my 40th birthday, not have a party or anything like that, but like something about letting go of this past 40 years of my life and looking forward. And of course, when I heard that, and I was like, this is it. This is
Get a
what
flight
I've,
to the jungle of Peru,
yeah,
the Amazon, right?
I know I'm going to the Amazon, here I come. Uh, and, and so, yeah, and I came down the following year. And, even, and leading up to that, I was also really trying to figure out ancestral trauma and transhistorical trauma as well, because I've written and studied it so much, and I was like, well, how do I do it now?
Right.
How do I really
Right.
do it? I'd been trying to do it, but really didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. So I brought all these aspirations to the jungle, to the retreat. And, I'm always trying to articulate what medicine work is, for people. And like,
Mhm.
there's really no way to describe it. Like, people really won't get it until they do
Yeah, it's an
it.
indescribable state. Yeah,
You really,
everything about it. Mhm.
so, but my experience and the words that I have, it was like the most loving, um, awakened spirit, like stepping in and saying, okay, I'm going
Mm.
to take care of you now. But it's real love. So it's not love that necessarily feels good, it's love that's going to get you free. And to get free, you have to move through a lot of suffering. So that's my relationship to medicine. Right?
Has it still stayed? It seems better now, right? As we work with it. But
Yeah, it
it
gets
has that
better.
edge to it. It seemed like it gets better,
It
like it
gets better.
lightens. Yeah.
But I was starting this arc of practice that took what did it end up taking? It took about 23 ceremonies
Mhm.
to finish, beginning in 2019, and of course taking off 2020, you know,
Right.
and then getting back into it in 2021, and 2022. Um, so yeah, so my first ceremony was like, I don't know if this is going to work, you know, and the medicine is extremely intelligent. So it's going to catch you off guard. And so it started catching me off guard and coming in a way that I wasn't perceiving it. I couldn't catch it. It was so
Right.
subtle. Like it was just like
Mm.
a very slow creeping, you know, into awakening, in my mind and body. But when I got there, I was like, oh, this is it. And it was overwhelming. I just found everything to be overwhelming. It was hard to understand. It was hard to like grasp on anything. And that just became the roller coaster that I was on for the next 6 ceremonies. But so that was the first ceremony. The first ceremony was like an introduction. Like, this is what I am. This is what we're going to do.
Right.
And then the second ceremony really began this experience I had no idea could be experienced, right?
Mhm.
But the sex ceremony was the introduction to the middle passage, right?
Right.
And like, it was everything, it was everything, that one would experience, that our ancestors experienced, surviving the middle passage, being captured, right? Being chained, being held, then being, you know, trapped and placed into the hull of the ship, right? That's
Yeah.
barreling, across the Atlantic, right? And all of the like brutal, violent, evil things that were happening
Yes.
to our people who were completely dehumanized that became cargo, you
Right.
know, and with no sensitivity to that we were actually human. Like we
Yes, to be
needed like
mhm.
you know, I mean I just again like words really become really difficult because it was the the middle passage is an experience that like we can't even fathom, you know.
Yeah.
Um but the medicine took me right through it. You
The
know?
medicine's like, we have to go back into this to
We we
liberate it,
we have to
right?
go back into the central trauma
Mhm.
in many Black people's ancestral lines, particularly those who are descendant from enslaved people. Not all Black people are
Right.
descendant from enslaved people, but a lot of us in this country and the Caribbean, and other countries, South America, most of us are descendant from enslaved people who survived the Middle Passage, and that trauma is lodged in our bodies, in our DNA, in our minds, our consciousness.
And you think for
So,
me too, it's lodged even in the body of the earth.
yes,
Like it's a
yeah,
suffering. I felt like very much when I work with medicine too, when I was seeing
mm,
you, seeing my own, it's
yeah,
stuck in the earth
yeah,
body as a
hmm
wound.
hmm
Hmm.
hmm absolutely, like this open wound,
Yeah, it's like an open.
right?
The
That,
Holocaust, I also feel
yeah, yeah,
feel very similar.
yeah, yeah.
But this was just yeah. So yes, say more about what you
hmm So
yeah how
yeah,
you
so like
met
in
it.
this, like
Yeah,
I didn't, all of a sudden I was there. Like it
right.
wasn't like the medicine was never like, okay, I'm
Do
gonna
you want
prepare
to?
you.
Right.
No, I wasn't. I had already made the choice to do it. Like my
Mm,
intention to undergo healing, ancestral healing, was the consent. Again, by any
absolutely.
means necessary.
You came with a
Which
kind of warrior
is
spirit,
yeah, and
right?
that kind of defines my whole practice and my whole way of being in the world. Just like by any means necessary, this is where I'm going, and I'll just take on whatever I need to take on to get there. So I mean, I was just like all of a sudden I was there, and I mean, it was. I mean, it was so much trauma. I'd never experienced that much trauma
Mhm.
before, and I was living the experience through the body of one of my ancestors, my root ancestors,
Mm,
who's
mhm.
so much. It was so much like Harriet Tubman that I would even assume that it was Harriet Tubman,
Mhm.
that was guiding me through this experience. But yeah, I lived through the body of this early ancestor, who was about 14, 13, 14-year-old girl. And so I was this 14-year-old girl, 13, 14-year-old girl in the slave ship and like living through the sensory overwhelm of like the heat, the smell, like it was just blood and urine and like shit, you know,
Right,
you
and dead
know,
people. People were
dead people,
dying. Yeah, everywhere.
darkness,
Mhm.
like for days and months on end, weeks, you know, and how my ancestor and me had this intense fortitude that we were not going to die, like that
Right.
we were going to survive. And the way that I felt her and us, I guess, 'cause it was both of us, but it was her w- call in this intense strength and
Mhm.
conviction, right? To like will herself through this, right? Um,
Absolutely. I feel like Harriet Tubman's grandmother was that way,
yeah,
Modesty.
yeah,
She probably was around the same age. It could have been
yeah.
connected, Rod. Could have been
I've been
connected.
thinking lately, this past week actually,
Mhm.
about a lot of these similarities,
Mhm.
going back and sitting with Harriet and like studying more about
Her
modesty.
grandmother
It's like,
Modesty came
yeah,
over. That was the beginning of their lineage.
yeah,
In America. They went
yeah,
on. Mhm.
you know. And then again, these are just words, but this was like an experience that transcended words. And I was just in the middle of it, and I was in and out, right?
'Cause it's hard to stay conscious of the
Yeah,
level of pain. I know
yeah,
when I was going through, I was blacking out for
yeah,
moments. I just like,
exactly.
"Oh my god, oh my god." Like, Yes. It's a
Yeah.
lot. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, during that experience, I remember you being there with me,
Yeah.
and you were holding my back and reminding me to, like, breathe, you know?
Yeah, because
And
people
I would
often rock.
Yeah,
They rock and they can't
yeah,
breathe.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I was breathing, and then I would fall back into it, you know? Um, yeah, and then, you come out of it, but the whole experience lives with you. So I'm remembering bits and pieces of the experience more and more these days, right? And
Mm.
I've written about this too in the volume Black and Buddhist, that we'll have a link for in this
Yes.
episode's notes. Um, and you can read more about those experiences. But like one of the things that I was taught, well, I was guided also through the experience by Anansi, which is
Right, your
the
spirit
spider
guide.
god, yeah,
Yes.
and who came, like he was one of the gods who chose to come with our ancestors through the Middle Passage. There
Mhm.
were other gods, of course, but he was much more present um, for a lot of our ancestors, and it's so bizarre because so the writer Neil Gaiman,
Mhm.
who's one of my favorite science fiction fantasy writers, wrote this book called American Gods, and talked about Anansi,
Oh,
and Anansi's
wow.
association with the Middle Passage, right?
Wow, I don't think
Um,
people know about this.
mm-mm, mm-mm. And so Anansi was like guiding me through it, but I didn't know that until the bulk of this ended and he introduced himself to me.
Hmm.
But one of the things that he showed me, well, one of the things I remembered after the fact that he showed me was like the root of transhistorical ancestral trauma in different cultures, and one of the visions he gave me was, you know, when our ancestors survived the Middle Passage, like the vision that I got was that like their skin turned gray, like
Right.
our ancestors' skin, as to symbolize the emergence of this intense trauma that would be passed down intergenerationally, creating, of
Right.
course, the basis for transhistorical trauma, like this trauma that the only way we dealt with it was to like bury it, and to
Yeah,
cope
forget
with it,
it. Yeah, to
forget it.
almost forget it. We
Yeah.
forget because too much.
And then it begins to shape, unconsciously shape everything, right? How our culture develops, how our
Lives in
culture
our
develops.
somatic body too.
Yeah.
Somatic informs
Yeah.
everything.
So it was like an experience that was lodged in our bodies and minds, but fed by the system of chattel slavery and racism and anti-Black racism specifically, right? So it was like being
Yes.
re-emphasized, and that's the challenge that we face, right? Um, but going back, to that vision, right? So our ancestors turned gray, but like he would bring, so Anansi would bring out children from different cultures and races that had survived collective
Mm.
cultural trauma. So
Mhm.
he showed me like indigenous Native American children, like who were like just covered in blood, you
Mhm.
know, Jewish children, right, who were like zombies, you know.
Yeah. Mm.
Um, and just like he kept showing me kids from like cultures that I never even heard of on this planet, right? Going back
Mhm.
for like
That's sad, actually. Think
thousands and
about it.
thousands of
Yeah.
years. Yeah. And he was like, "Oh, this is the particular energetic impact of trauma on these cultures of people," you know? And, I was just like, you know, it was an answer to a prayer, right? And of course, my prayer was like, what is transhistorical trauma,
Like,
right?
and you're gonna learn it here up in
Yeah,
the closest
yeah,
possible embodied way. Also,
yeah.
talk about one thing for me
Mhm,
that stood out in being with you during that
mhm,
time and in those ceremonies and kind of feeling your journey was
mhm.
also how it manifested with your legs, these
Yeah,
chains that I kept
yeah, yeah,
seeing. I
yeah,
think this is really interesting because,
yeah.
yeah, just if you feel comfortable sharing about
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
chains, because I think that it
Yeah,
was so symbolic.
yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about that today,
Oh,
actually.
wow.
Yeah, because I'm in doing some CrossFit,
Yes, I'm so
and
happy we all need to work out these
I
days to
know.
keep up with this. Uh-huh.
Hopefully, by the time this episode airs, I'll still be in CrossFit, but
You have to be careful. That's all I say. Be careful.
you have to be
Injuries in
careful. You do.
CrossFit are real.
It's a real
Yeah.
thing. So I'm like really just trying to be careful, but like I'm focusing on my legs right
Yes.
now. And so I've been
Mm.
really reflecting on my legs and in ceremony. Yeah, like when I started drinking medicine, I couldn't walk well anymore. Like I couldn't like, climb stairs. I would be moving really slowly. It would take me a lot of time to like get up, and start moving somewhere. And then
And even
finally,
then, it was so unsteady. It
yeah, it's
was like
unsteady.
almost like a tipping. It was like tipping over. Like, oh, whoa,
Yeah.
this doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you sharing that you saw chains helped me to like actually see them, those chains. And those
Mm.
chains represented it was just the first thing in a series of things I've had to do with my legs. But like the first thing that I saw was clearly like these chains. I was like, oh, I have these chains on my ankles, right? And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna break them. you know, and that really solved the issue because I felt like part of the transhistorical trauma were these energetic chains that prevented me from actually experiencing true freedom, right?
Yeah,
And
because
these
we're chained on the
chains,
ship. We're
yeah,
chained, and then they're
yeah,
chained on the way to the ship to
yeah, yeah,
after you get sold. There's a lot of chains.
yeah, yeah, and that's like the symbol for a lot of us, right? It's like these energetic chains that keep us
Mhm,
bound,
mhm,
right? That's
shackles.
the trauma, these shackles, right? So I broke those chains, right? And it's still, there was, still issues I was working out because it was like, okay, now that you're in chains, now you have to figure out how to walk on the earth again, right? So it
Free.
just doesn't, things just don't clear up automatically. Like you're having to train yourself to walk again, right? And that again, when you like heal trauma, move through trauma, like you get kind of put into this new life and you have to start learning things again. You have to learn how to move through the world in a way that's not being informed by trauma any longer. And that can be just as difficult,
It's like an
right?
integration to freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
you're let loose, but you're not free. I always have
Yeah.
that in my mind. We're like
Yeah.
let loose, but we
Yeah.
have to learn how to be.
Exactly. Because the trauma has trained us to be boundaried and shut down and numb. And when we get that open space to be ourselves, like you have to move through a lot of discomfort, right? You have to start connecting to the space instead of like the contraction or the lack of space, right?
Absolutely. I remember when those chains came off, it was at the end of the retreat, final
Yeah.
ceremony, and I saw you, and it was the first time you could stand and walk. I
Yeah.
was like, "Ah!" It was like, "Rod, you did it." And it
Yeah.
really was like something magical to be there because somehow part of my spirit was living through you. I had experienced
Yeah.
something very similar years
Mhm.
ago in doing a retreat. And it was the most intense thing I'd ever experienced in my life. There was
Yeah.
moments of it
Mhm.
where, you're
Mhm.
touching in through the
Mhm.
ayahuasca, moments where I thought, "I could die from this
Yeah.
hurt." But then we survive,
Yeah.
we're resilient.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And it was, it was the worst night of my life by
right.
far, right? And I think people, are wondering, okay, what's the point of
Yeah. It's like, why
doing
am I gonna go and
do
relive
we
this?
if I'm black and descendant from enslaved people, am I going to go through this if I try plant medicine, And like the first thing that I want to say too is that like the medicine doesn't give you more than you can handle. Like
Exactly. You
it's
have to be
not
ready for this. Yeah.
you have to be
You called it in
ready and
like you
trained.
did. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not like the medicine is trying to annihilate you, to kill you. It's only going to give you what you can handle. But like a lot of us, well, I would say just for me, it was like sometimes I don't fully connect to my capacity to hold things. So I can get a lot
Mm.
and feel like it's overwhelming. Try like wake up and say, you know what, I can do this. That's kind of like the spirit that came into this world with is like, I'm going to survive, you know? And you like, who, I think you like helped me to see this about myself, which is that like I will choose to do it. I'll choose the work and then I'll figure out how to do it later. Like I like
Right.
I'll go to the
Right.
work and I'll go and I'll choose it knowing that like I'll get through it. Like I'm going to get through this. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I'm going to get through it and that's all that matters. Like I don't have to know how to do it, you know, but I'll know that I'll figure it out. Right.
And
And
you
so,
do.
yeah,
Yeah, you do. You got the hang of it really
yeah,
quickly, actually.
yeah,
It was
you
like the
know,
most distressing experience of your life, one of
yeah,
them. I'm sure,
hmm,
in those moments, I really would say that that's a
yeah,
kind of trauma. You're
yeah,
at the bone. You're at the
yeah.
heart of the
You're at the bone. Yeah,
you're at the wound, the center of
yeah,
it, and to
yeah,
breathe and survive and then
yeah,
start thriving.
yeah. Well, and then the second part of this too, why we go through this is to well, there's a couple of reasons, but quickly, like the first reason is to like actually remember this experience because it's still our experience. There's still memories and trauma, or the trauma in the form of like pain and and contraction in our experience, in our minds and bodies, right, in our DNA. So we're remembering that it's there and
Mhm.
connecting to it, right? So we know what it is. And secondly, it's collective healing. It's like I feel like we touch into this experience and we metabolize as much as possible, not just for ourselves, but for our collective, for our community, right?
Absolutely.
So we like
Absolutely.
we're using our bodies and our practice to metabolize, to channel this trauma out of the collective experience, and just purifying that energy and releasing it, you know. That's
Absolutely.
and that's what collective trauma healing is like we're metabolizing a lot of energy that's in the collective and moving that through our body. We do our part. Of course, we can't do everything. Like, we can't heal the whole collective, but we determine our capacity and we take
And
on
run
what
the
we can take
energy.
on,
Mhm.
and we release it. So that's why we go through it as well. And one day, maybe this collective trauma will not be a huge issue and no one will have to like go through that. But I think for the foreseeable future,
It
right?
feels absolutely. It feels like we are another round of it. I
Yeah.
think, people were just trying to survive in
Yeah.
the 50s and the 60s
Yeah.
after slavery, right? They were just trying to
Yeah.
live. Now it's like
Yeah.
we actually have the time to feels like
Yeah.
this generation has the power, the
Yes.
time, and the ability to maybe take on a bigger piece of this
Yeah.
collective work.
Yeah.
Because obviously with George Floyd's murder and
Yeah.
all those murders, it hit another wound, right? It
Yeah.
reignited the wound. And for people who um have a kind of power, I think they do experience this. I think
Yeah.
they many will. And I've even met people that were white. I met a guy from
Yeah.
Holland who once went through reliving a slave ship, his Dutch
Mhm.
ancestors. So he had a
Mm.
different position,
Right.
but he was
Right.
living it out as a slave and
Yeah.
was completely overwhelmed by the experience, completely was
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
was, so I think, and also a lot of us, as we do this liberation
Mhm.
work, we are metabolizing all the hurt and pain created by this trauma. Because when I was writing the Harriet Tubman book,
Mhm.
and for some of you, Harriet Tubman, there's a chapter in the third
Mhm.
book about her family lineage, and it starts with modesty coming over, they think, from Ghana, and you'll be able to read the chapter.
Mhm.
Um, but it feels like Harriet said this wound is not only alive in the bodies of the people, it's like the ocean was contaminated in
Yeah.
some way. The water, you imagine
Mhm.
you have ship after ship after ship carrying these
Mhm.
people, like the body, the water, it's still, and
Yeah.
that's why I said it's the earth, but particularly in the oceans,
Mhm.
and so that's really interesting too.
Yeah.
And I just feel that us making safe places to
Mhm.
release this energy is my priority.
Yeah.
How do I,
Yeah.
I helped with, and that's what's so helpful with plant medicine is we can
Mhm.
do this really deep
Exactly.
ancestral work
Yeah.
in a way that won't destroy you,
Yeah.
within a retreat, in a ceremony, with people
Right.
loving you and holding hands and singing to you and holding your
Mhm.
back. Like we need to be able to create more spaces where others
Mhm.
can release this, because I think
Right.
we're definitely not the only ones that
Mhm.
feel the need. It's like stuck
Yeah.
in their body. They feel chains. So
Exactly.
I'm just wondering in the future, how we're doing that. This land,
Mhm.
everybody getting land and, going
Mhm.
back kind of natural. I feel like we start to learn to metabolize more when we're alone on the land, don't you?
Yeah.
And through these
Yeah.
meditation and prayer and church, we're metabolizing all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to have the courage to do that,
Yeah, we have to
to
be willing to endure the feelings, the
right.
sensations,
Yeah.
to feel, knowing that it's
Mhm.
temporary.
Mhm. Mhm.
Knowing, and that's why I think
Yeah.
our energy amongst people of the diaspora, when we're together, there's a power. I
Yeah.
think alone is hard. Like you wouldn't have been
Mhm.
able to do that depth alone. You had to be
Right.
with a medicine, in a group of people, with healers surrounding
Yeah.
you, with support to go
Yeah.
that deep.
Yeah.
You could have done it, but it just was so
Yeah.
accelerated. We went
Yeah.
right to it.
Mhm.
Like how
Mhm.
many of us have real capacity to experience that in daily life,
Yeah.
to break those shackles that are on the DNA level?
And the space
And the
to do it.
space and the
So many people
food and
feel like,
the
yeah.
water and we're already
Yeah.
tired. And then you
Yeah,
add this on.
no. I mean, it's
Oh, let's
like
break these
yeah.
ancestral chains.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think people, listening to this, they may look at us and say, "Well, Rod and Spring, like, you have all this privilege to do this because this is what you do. Like, this is your work.
Right. You're
Like, it's
supposed
to
to do it.
heal, and, like, you've developed this life where you can just take off all this time."
Right.
Right, to do that,
Yeah.
I completely recognize that.
Me too.
Absolutely, but we all have some capacity to do something, right? Regardless of where we are, like in life. And we have to start actually recognizing that and doing what we can where we are in the moment. And the more we do, the more the universe will open up more space and opportunity because we're aligning ourselves like with
Right,
the
so those
frequency of light.
opportunities will come. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's going to come when you choose the light, and the light is the healing, the
Mm.
healing work. But you have to just like be like, I have 5 minutes a day, right, to do something. And that's where you start,
You got to
and more and more.
practice. You got
Yeah.
to dedicate. There's no
Yeah.
liberation is not, you can't pray for it.
Yeah.
You know, you can get support like that
Yeah.
through prayer, but you've got to actually engage
Yeah,
in
yeah,
this alchemy of your mind. You actually have to
yeah.
work on the
You have
mind.
to
You have to
work.
let go. You have to
Yeah.
feel,
It's
right? Isn't
doing.
that
Yeah.
what we're trying to get people to
Yeah.
understand is there's a path
Yeah.
and a well-trodden one.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. You know? Um, and so we have to do all of that, you know? And
Sorry,
also,
everybody, but
yeah,
you do. It's like
yeah,
another job in a way.
yeah, yeah, and as you were just saying, Spring, it's like, but the best way to do it is in community, like with people who
Yes.
are also aligned with the work, you know. A lot of people won't understand. Well, I'll back that up and say, a lot of people haven't understood or understand what we do.
Right.
It's
We're
like
out
when
there
I
a little
take
bit.
off. Yeah. It's like you take off and you spend a month in retreat, or you go down to the jungle, or you go to India, some of the things that I do, as much as possible. And people are like, oh, you're going for a vacation. No, I'm going to work. Like there's like teaching or something that I'm going to get from these places so I can work with it, metabolize it, and then give it to you.
Absolutely.
And that's what we do. Like we do our work and we metabolize this work and we show you how to do it for yourself in a way that's appropriate,
Yeah,
you
and
know.
I think all of us are learning as space holders, healers, teachers, authors. We're learning how to do this better and better. But we
Yeah.
have to keep growing in order to hold more space and
Yeah.
provide a safe space for everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm excited about our conversations because I feel that through our dialogue, through us talking about our own healing journeys, through
Mhm.
us being so open, so real about the good, the bad, the ugly, the tears, the joy,
Mhm.
in ways in which we are using these tools, practices to awaken. I hope that it's in service to all those listening on how to work with these energies and to our conversations on liberation. I just hope are helpful for people because I love talking about this, and I know the more that we talk about it, also we are continuously focused on how to create
Mhm.
more avenues. That's my
Yeah.
focus. Like I told you about this land project. Like,
Yeah.
how do I
Yeah.
create a sanctuary for
Exactly.
more
Yeah.
people to let go of this DNA level ancestral trauma that feels like, whether you call it the
Yeah.
curse, the family
Yeah.
curse, or
Yeah.
whatever. Let's like, it's
Yeah.
time. It's time
It's
for our people
time.
to get free. And only we
Yeah.
can do it. Actually, we
Yeah.
can do it now.
Yeah. Yeah. But we have to be willing to do it. We have to deepen our compassion and love, and really like wrap ourselves in joy because that's how I get through.
Yeah.
It's like all of that. Writing about this kind of concept of awakened care in my book, New Saints, right? And what is awakened care? But for me, awakened care is like these streams of love and compassion and joy coming together, right? Being held by
Yeah.
wisdom and clarity. And I feel like I get filled up with this and I'm able to start pouring,
Yes.
for
Yes.
others, from this flow within my own experience. So I let the practice do the work, for
Hmm.
me. And that's what propels me into one thing after the other, you
It's
know.
like a fountain.
It's a
Hmm.
fountain, right? And I know that I will always be cared for as long as I am connected to my practice. Like I don't have that fear of not having what I need anymore,
Yeah,
right?
that's really
Even
well, that's profound. Say that
yeah.
again.
I mean, I don't have any fear of not having what I need anymore. Even when I
Mm,
was in the middle passage moving to the middle passage, I didn't feel like I was just kind of let loose and out there alone. Yeah, it was overwhelming and brutal, but I was still being supported through it, right?
Yeah. You had these
You know?
guides and
Yeah.
angels around you.
Yeah. And so now, like, like I said earlier, I've completed this arc, and that arc was ancestral healing, like moving through,
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
that was just the beginning. The middle passage was
It's
just
been a
like
journey of the last
opening the
few years.
door,
Yeah, that was like, "Hello,
you know?
ancestral."
Like, it was like the middle passage was just like the fog that I had to, like, disperse, right? To get to the next level, of
Absolutely.
real ancestral healing, which we'll talk about later on. But like that real ancestral healing is when you really touch the ancestral line, like when you really touch that sorrow and that hurt and that suffering, right? And then you channel it out, you know, which
And it
is
becomes our
painful.
magic. Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it's our bodies. Like our bodies become conduits for moving and releasing this trauma from our ancestral line. And that was a whole nother level of practice, you know,
Hallelujah.
that was completely
Absolutely.
like, what is this? Yeah, things that weren't things again, in this magic, there are things that just are possible that you never thought were ever possible, you know. Um, I study a lot of like healing modalities, but also I study a lot of paranormal psychology stuff, and workings. And often, like, there were people in the field who would be like, okay, there's nothing that can be done about
Mm.
whatever thing is happening, a demon or whatever, vortex. And I say, oh, but ayahuasca, like, can actually be an ally, you
Yeah,
know?
people need to know that this
Yeah,
plant, this doctor, this medicine
yeah,
is profound.
yeah,
And whatever you believe you know about it, you
yeah,
probably we're going to have conversations that will probably illuminate the real power and
exactly.
magic and potential of this
Yeah,
plant. Um, it's part of our
exactly.
conversations. Well, Rod, I mean, we could talk forever about this. And I think,
Yep.
you know, if we were going to just sum it all up
Mhm,
for people who are, at different stages of their journey,
mhm.
there's good work to do.
Yeah, yeah,
I think both of us have both gone through a big chunk. And now
yeah.
some of the more of the joy and the
Mhm.
glory is happening,
Yes.
the
Yeah, yeah,
expansiveness, the magic.
yeah, yeah,
We're kind of on the
yeah,
other side, but it's in a few years of like,
yeah,
intensity as everybody has been kind of going through this in
yeah,
the last few years, like this
yeah.
purification. Um, but I just want to say, I know your intention is similar. We have
Mhm,
this shared intention on just helping people
mhm,
access these liberation practices, to share
mhm.
about them, whether it's plant medicine,
Yeah,
meditation, somatics, um, paranormal psychology,
yeah, yeah,
uh, I just want to create these avenues for our people in these conversations where people can really understand, okay, what can be helpful.
yeah, yeah. And that there are so many resources in the world, right? And you just kind of have to have a fearlessness. Again, like with me, I was just like,
Yeah.
I want to get free. And so therefore I'm going to do anything to get free. Right. But I think one of the most important things that we all need to do, particularly everyone who's listening, is that you have to start with a clear, authentic intention. Like you
Mhm.
have to just like every day, and this was one of the first teachings from one of my teachers, who was like, you want to do all this stuff, but you're not clear. You just need to get clear about what you want to do and just keep repeating that over and over. It's like
Mhm.
making like a dream board you
A
know,
vision
in a way.
board,
A
yeah.
vision board, right, you know? Your intention is your vision board, and I started at the very beginning of my practice saying that, like, I just wanna be free. I wanna be
Right.
happy. Like, I wanna do good work, and that's just why I kept saying over and over again, and then all the resources over time started coming, you
Yeah,
know?
it's like you steering your own ship, you're
Yeah,
pushing yourself toward the sun, the light,
yeah,
the what you want. And so, yeah, and also for people to understand that they're worthy of this.
yeah.
However
Exactly.
long you've been defined by trauma,
Yeah,
shackles, every chain can be broken. Harriet used to
exactly.
say that to me.
Yeah,
Every chain can be broken. I would
yeah,
feel the suffering and be like, that can be broken.
yeah,
We have to, there's some faith involved.
yeah, yeah, there's just
You
a
need to,
moment.
yes, and to set your sights. I love that. I love these conversations, and I love the fact that we're both making things happen with the books,
Yes. Yeah.
your book about saints, my Harriet
Mhm,
Tubman book.
mhm.
We're trying to inspire and channel these ancestors and these
Yeah,
practices and these open up these conversations and this indigenous medicine. Um, so everybody, we're gonna have a lot to share going
mhm,
forward. We'll have people of color retreats where we work on these ancestors topics with plant medicine in Costa Rica. Um, Lama Rodrigo, as I call him.
mhm.
That's his South American name. We'll be joining on some of those retreats,
Yeah,
and we will be, working with the ancestor world with like this conductor. So I feel like our next conversation will be all about conductors, and
yes. Yeah,
yes, I'm with Harriet and all these
yeah,
other, and they're walking with the saints, walking in this way, embodying
yeah,
that the new saints.
yeah,
Um, well, thank you, Rod, Lama Rod. I love
yeah, thank
talking with you.
you.
I always feel so inspired.
Yeah, thank you. This has been so wonderful as always.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. And until the next episode.
No way, no way.